What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. On today's episode, we'll be breaking down, again, a little bit more details with the Chicago Bulls schedule. We'll also talk about other teams' schedule and how it compares to the Chicago Bulls. A rumor for Vooch for Duncan Robinson. Where do the Bulls rank amongst the Central Division teams this upcoming season? And lastly, who is the Bulls' biggest secret weapon? We'll get into all that and more on today's Chicago Bulls Central.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
All right, Bulls fans. So to add a little bit more color to talk about the schedule, because we did get some comments in it. So the Bulls do have the 11th hardest strength of schedule and are tied with the Nets for the hardest strength of schedule with from playoff teams last season. Now, Atlanta and Cleveland, they have the 3rd and 5th easiest schedules in the NBA, and Toronto has the 11th easiest schedule amongst those former playoff teams as well. Now, that has led me naturally to think like, all right, well, we know the strength of schedule, right? We know where that sits. We know that it's going to be a difficult stretch for the Chicago Bulls. It's a little bit more balanced up front, a little bit easier in the middle, but then the last part of the Bulls schedule does get considerably more tough. So how does that rank for the Chicago Bulls? How are they going to deal with this? The amount of rest that they're going to need, the amount of back-to-backs that they have, having those 15 back-to-backs in the NBA, which is the tied for the most with it. They're in a 4-way tie with a couple of teams for the most back-to-backs in the NBA next season. And so, I think a lot's being made about this, right? And yes, we know that the Bulls have a tough schedule. They're going to have some of the least amount of rest from teams. But at the end of the day, the thing with that it is that, listen, every team goes through to a degree. Yeah, is there some discrepancy there? Yes, there's a lot of it, especially when you look at other teams, of the playoff teams, things like that, how traveled the Bulls are going to be, the fact that they're going to come into a lot of the back-to-backs having the rest disadvantage, which we talked about on yesterday's episode. All those things are true. And while they're going to be tested early, the Chicago Bulls, I think, sometimes forget, as fans, that we forget that this team, when fully healthy now, if they going to be fully healthy is the question, are one of the deeper teams in the NBA. Now, one could say quality depth is different, right? But I think sometimes we forget that at the beginning of the season, even after Patrick Williams went down, the bench mob was back. We got this. There is something to be said with this team. And yes, while it is going to be a small lineup generally that we go to off the benches, looking at some of the better players off the bench, the energy, the athleticism, the getting out in transition that this team can do if they play defense at the levels that we know that they can, and they showed at parts last season, that it's going to be a season in which I think that the Bulls are going to have to adjust in big ways, specifically with how much they trust their bench. Looking at the minutes Zach LaVine played before his injury last season, and even after the injury to a degree. Looking at the minutes that DeMar DeRozan played all season. If we want those legs to be fresh down the stretch of the season, when we have some of our biggest tough matchups at that end part of the season, the Bulls are going to have to trust and develop their depth. And that's going to be a huge thing for the Chicago Bulls, is continuing to develop. For people who are like, well, Patrick Williams, he needs more shots. I'm one of those people here, right? Let me be clear. Patrick Williams does need more of that. So as we talk about that, and as we discuss it and look at it, this brings home that point even more. Vooch is going to have to hit down the shots. He's going to have to be a more consistent player than what he was for the majority of last season. All these things are true, and all these things, if they do happen, can go towards the Chicago Bulls being able to weather that tough storm and weather those back-to-backs a little bit tougher. What's the rest schedule going to look like for Lonzo Ball if he is ready to go? What's it going to look like for Zach LaVine, who is coming off a minor knee surgery, and by all stretch and everything that we've seen and heard, he's going to be ready to go. But still, with that being said, is he going to need some rest? That means that players like Ayo Dosunmu, players like Goran Dragic, who's on this team, Alex Caruso, Javonte Green, Dalen Terry to a degree as well, Andre Drummond, Derrick Jones Jr., Marko Simonovic. Marco, what do you got for us? Because these are times now where we're going to need somebody to step up in big ways in certain nights, because there are going to be nights where DeMar DeRozan and Zach may not have it down the stretch. Who's going to step up? You would think that it's going to be Vooch. You would then think Patrick Williams as well, and some of the things that he's flashed. But at the end of the day, it's going to be by committee some days. We're going to need to get back to being that team that at times that we just had a contribution from somebody off the bench. And Kobe White, what is Kobe White? Because Kobe White and his scoring, if it can be consistent, or even let's not even say the consistency on the nights that Kobe White is on, is going to be even bigger for the Chicago Bulls because yes, the schedule is a tough schedule. The Chicago Bulls are one of only 5 teams with 15 sets of back-to-back, right? And then with that, they still have the rest disadvantage more times than not. So while the path in this, I still believe in this Bulls team as a playoff. Some, Joker said yesterday, asked me, well, we agree that this team's going to be a first round. I said, no, we have never seen this team fully healthy. And we don't know what the additions of Andre Drummond is really going to do. We don't know what type of leaps that Ayo Dosunmu or Patrick Williams can make. We don't know what type of player that Dalen Terry is really going to be on this type of team. But at the end of the day, Billy Donovan, the coaching staff, and something that I've said for a long part all throughout this offseason, are going to have to adjust. It can't just be isolation ball down the stretch when things get tough. It can't be that. There are going to be absolutely games and days of that, right? There are going to be games where DeMar just has it going, and you can't stop DeMar. You keep feeding up the monster at that point. There are going to be games where Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball are just shooting the ball lights out, and Zach is back in that mode where he knows how to pick his spots, and he's daring people to stop him. But at the end of the day, it's going to need to be more. Who is going to step up in a big way for the Chicago Bulls to get to that point? That's what it's going to be even more. The bench is going to be a huge, important part of the Chicago Bulls team next season. So while we're talking, and we've been talking about it all this offseason on what that rotation is going to look like for the Chicago Bulls, they're going to have to figure that out early. Use the lighter parts of the schedule to give more minutes to people. Use the games where you're facing somebody you're clearly better than to not have to play DeMar and Zach 35, 36 minutes. Maybe you can even get them under 30 minutes. But you're going to have to develop this team. And that's something that we got away from at time. Well, let me not say we got away from that. That honestly would not be a fair statement to say that. Because Ayo, his role continued to increase now due to injury, but we're going to have to see an evolution of the Bulls and what they do. Lonzo needs the ball in the half court, especially if he's healthy. We need to see what he's going to be able to do, because there are going to be games, especially on the number of back-to-backs, where guess what? You're facing your fourth team in 5 nights. And this isolation ball is not going to cut it. So you're going to need that. You're going to need to see, some people who think, oh, well, Ayo isn't going to get. No, you absolutely need to see Ayo get minutes that he deserves. You're going to need to hopefully see Javonte Green, who just played in the Denard Bros pro run. Shout out to him for that, for balling this summer. Javonte Green, you're going to need to see something from him. Are you going to need to see some of Malcolm Hill on that 2-way contract? One of the biggest things with this that I think really helps this Bulls lineup, or helps kind of project it out a little bit more, is once we know what Marko Simonovic is going to be able to give the Bulls next season. Right, you have your second round pick that you guys think very highly of, and I do believe, some of the mindset that as a second round pick, can you really be a bust, because second round picks usually don't make it. But Marko, with the certain circumstances that he came in, he was only a second round pick because he was a European player. I guarantee you, had he played in college over here and was coming over, he would have been a first round pick. Marko Simonovic, who has nothing left to learn in the G League, he showed that his offensive skill set, that he can take over games, things like that. He needs to be able to give us something. If your defense isn't quite there, Marko, okay, what can you give us on the offensive end? You put on this weight. You put on what, 15 pounds of muscle? Is it 20 pounds of muscle, something like that? You put that on. We need to see that big body now for the Chicago Bulls, because guess what? In a team, in a season where we have the strength of schedule in which we do, the bench is going to have to step up big time. What is that going to look like for the Chicago Bulls? What's the player that comes in and night out and gives us a little bit more? Who's going to have the one that just has the hot hand that night? Is it going to be Javonte Green some nights? Yes. Is it going to be Kobe White some nights? Yes, as much as some Bulls fans don't want to see it. Is it going to be Ayo Dosunmu some nights? Abso-freaking-lutely. Andre Drummond and him coming off the bench, that defense, like how many extra possessions do you give the Bulls with that rebounding? It's only him and Wilt. When you look at rebounds per game in that average, really, he's up there. Some people said he's a generational rebounder, period. That there's no question about that. That is not up for discussion. But how does he work within the framework of this team? He's a little bit better of a passer too, but if he gets the ball on offense, he can turn into a black hole at times. But with that being said, how much does that dividend pay off? And we may see that it comes back that maybe the Bulls should have done more with their mid-level exception over the course of the season. If we start getting into that tough schedule down the stretch where we just run out of legs, then you have to look at the front office and say, hey, you didn't do much this offseason. Now you see it. We need to be better prepared for the dog days of the NBA grind. And to do that, you're going to have to spend the money. Now, that's some on ownership as well. But yes. Now, with that being said, with this talk about the bench and who steps up, Derrick Jones Jr. as well. Like, yeah, he showed some flashes when he's playing backup center. But again, I need to see more for Derrick Jones Jr. Me personally, I want to see more consistency from that because Derrick Jones Jr. shows a lot of flashes. And God forbid if Tony Bradley can be consistent as well, we'll see. But that brings me to this topic that I want to have, and then we'll debunk some rumors. We'll bust some rumors. Who is the Bulls, or what player on the Bulls is going to be the one to step up? What is the biggest or best kept secret when it comes to the Chicago Bulls bench? Now, this from an article in Bleacher Report that they named Coby White as potentially being the best kept secret on the Chicago Bulls. And while I initially wanted to go into that and disagree, I wanted to. But when you look at what Coby's able to bring in it with shooting, when it's on, right? With scoring, let me say scoring as a whole, because I keep saying, and I have the narrative that Coby White is a scorer, not just a shooter. But with that being said, Coby White absolutely could be that for the Chicago Bulls, but it's up to him to get out of his own head and be consistent and find a way to work himself into that. He has his first training camp. If Coby White comes out of this training camp firing on all cylinders, be on the lookout for how that transforms this Chicago Bulls bench. But because of that, I'm not going to pick that, right? I'm not going to go with that. It's an interesting conversation. Let me know down below, what do you think about Bleacher Report picking Coby White as the Chicago Bulls' best kept secret? But I'm actually going to go with this player. I think it may be Dalen Terry. And I know that's a lot to put on the rookie, and we may not see the fruition of that to the end of the season. We may see where Dalen Terry every month gets an increased role, more minutes, and he's trusted a little bit more. But I think Dalen Terry has the potential to really, I don't want to say transform this bench. I don't want to say dictate this bench. But if a Dalen Terry comes on and he's able to be the defensive player, and if he's able to give in a little bit more offensively, even if it's just in transition, even if it's more in dribbling and getting to the rim than it is shooting, right? I do think Dalen Terry is going to turn into a considerable shooter. I think once you get him working with a shooting coach, which the Bulls apparently don't have but may need. But with that being said, could Dalen Terry end up being that best kept secret? Let's move on from that terminology. Let's say secret weapon off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. That's a lot to put on a rookie. Let me be clear here. It's a higher chance that it's not going to happen than it actually happened. I want to be clear there. There's a higher probability that Dalen Terry is not going to play very many minutes for the Chicago Bulls than him to turn into this secret weapon. But when you look at the raw talent of Dalen Terry, the intensity, the defense, the length, the getting out in transition, the athleticism, the possible turnovers. What can he give us as a shooter? He's shown some flashes of shooting capability, but how does that come along over the course of the season? But it also, looking at it, let's rank it, right? Because Marko Simonovic also has a chance to be that. When you look at Marko, a 3-level scorer as a 7-footer, basically. 6'11", but you guys know what I mean. Playing that power forward / center position. Again, that's putting a lot on a player that hasn't shown anything yet. But if one of these players hit, if Dalen Terry, and this is different, right? We know Patrick Williams and Ayo Dosunmu, they can take leaps, but we know that they're going to have roles on this team. If Dalen Terry or Marko Simonovic, or God forbid both of them, shows that they can be something and be a contributor off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. Marko more with offense than trusting Marko to do anything defensively. Dalen Terry is kind of that player that's going to stuff the stat sheet, maybe not get you 15 points, but may get you 8 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, a couple of steals, and a couple of blocks, right? And I'm not saying averages for the season. I'm just saying over the course of games, he can get you stuff like that. Having players like that off the bench, Marko Simonovic, who may be able to come in and fill it up and give you 12 off the bench, you got to see if he can do it on the NBA level. Can completely transform the Chicago Bulls bench. When we're talking about the lack of rest, when we're talking about the number of back-to-backs, when we're talking about the strength of schedule, having players that show up like that, even if it's every 10 games, can be huge and paying dividends on nights where your starters may just not have it, or you may just need that player to step up. And hopefully they turn into that for the Chicago Bulls. And that's what I'm looking for. How does this coaching staff develop that? What is the plan for Marco? What is the plan for Dalen Terry? Those plans matter. And they matter even more. Again, the Bulls, are they going to win a title this year? That's slim to none. But in the continual growth of this team and the continual building blocks of this team and the continue hopefully now to trying to get out the first round, you need players like that to step up. Who's going to be it if we get one for the Chicago Bulls is the question. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Last topic of the day. No, not last topic, because we still got to also talk about where the Bulls rank in the Central Division. We'll end it on that, though. Nikola Vucevic, it's been rumors that the Heat are now interested in Nikola Vucevic. We debunked this over on Locked on Bulls, so I'm going to bring it over here. This all originated, there's like 4 layers of this, devolved from an article in which somebody was interviewed and they just said, hey, I talked to an NBA exec, random NBA exec. Anytime you hear that, that just means it's speculative. And they brought up, hey, if there is something to be made of this Nikola Vucevic trade, if there is interest from the Heat, Duncan Robinson's probably going to be involved in that trade. And that turned into, the Bulls or the Miami Heat are trying to pursue Nikola Vucevic for Duncan Robinson. It's not happening, people. It's not realistic. Listen, you got your rumor for the day. That was the joke of the day. Go ahead and laugh and move on. It's not happening. Always do your research. Always look at these things levels deep. It started at heavy.com. It's nothing. It's a lot of news about nothing. But with the conversation of the Bulls, looking at where can or will the Bulls rank amongst their Central Division opponents this season? We already know the Milwaukee Bucks should be very well. They're going to probably win. They're going to win the division, right? They're going to be favorites. They should be. Everything else like that. Not defending champions anymore, but they did get eliminated a little bit earlier in the playoffs. But again, when you got a generational player in Giannis Antetokounmpo, you're probably going to win the division. So that leaves the rest, right? What's the pecking order in the Central Division after the Milwaukee Bucks? And our closest competitor, I would say, is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the Detroit Pistons, let me be clear here. I love the Detroit Pistons roster, and I love what they're doing. But because they're so young, let's see how it comes across. We've been that team, that young, scrappy team that just seems to beat teams that have been around for longer and may sneak our way in the playoffs and get interested. I think the Detroit Pistons are going to be one of those teams that while they may not win a lot of games, that they're going to be in a lot of close games over the season. But the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Chicago Bulls, and the Indiana Pacers, they're last in the division, so we're not going to talk much about them. But the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Chicago Bulls are probably going to be jockeying for that second best team in the Central Division, probably also jockeying for the same playoff positioning as well. Now, they got 44 wins last season, only 2 less than what we did, but we know how everything went that season. This young team, and historically our rivals, in Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Isaac Okoro, that team is only going to get better. I think they're going to take leaps. They added Ochai Agbaji, right? They still got Lauri Markkanen in there. They brought back Ricky Rubio. So that's going to be an interesting matchup for the Chicago Bulls. But I still think, I look at the Chicago Bulls roster, I look at what we have on this, and I don't think that we're going to be able to stay ahead of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who we beat 3 out of 4 times last season, by the way. Let's go ahead and make sure. Yes, Evan Mobley did play really good against Vooch, but we still came out on the better end of those matchups. But you got to be on the lookout for that young, scrappy team. So the question that I'm going to ask to you guys, are the Chicago Bulls going to still finish second in the Central Division? Do you think that the Cleveland Cavaliers have done enough or are going to do enough to pass us up? But I'm really excited to look at this matchup. The Central Division is actually going to be a pretty fun team to watch. I think, like I said, 4 out of the 5 teams in the Central Division, I think, are going to be tough teams, tough games for opponents to play. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I would not be surprised if the Detroit Pistons end up with a winning record over one of the teams in the division while having a worse record overall. The Central Division is going to be fun to watch. And I'm starting there. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference some next week. But the Central Division is going to be a fun division to watch and just see how it works, especially considering everything that we just named. They have a lot of interesting young players over there. It's the Central Division is a fun division to watch, and it is our division. We get to have a lot of matches. We're going to play 12 games between the Milwaukee Bucks, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Detroit Pistons, and those are going to be a fun 12 games at that. Let me know down below, who do you think can come out in the second in the Central Division, and do you think there's a chance that a team may take that Central Division crown from the Milwaukee Bucks? Let me know all that down below. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Chicago Bulls Central. You are the best part of the show. Make sure you're following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, you can send us any text and our voicemails for our Saturday mailbag episodes, which is tomorrow, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end everything on, go Bulls. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.